This program is all about bird life and birds that live in our area. The other thing I have to mention that actually all the birds that I talk about are on the red list. They're all endangered. So this is quite an important thing. The main bird I'm going to be speaking about is the house sparrow. Sparrows are part of a group with tree sparrows. There's another sparrow which used to be called a hedge sparrow, but actually is a dunnock, and it's a different family altogether. You can see if you look at the bill that it's sharp and built for eating insects, whereas the house sparrow and the tree sparrow have got bills for crunching seeds. But we're talking about the house sparrow. They're actually part of the family of the most northern family member of weaver birds. And I think in some ways that's quite instructive, because you can see that weaver birds live in colonies, as do house sparrows. So they're our house sparrows don't build such exotic nests, but they certainly live in communities, which are called hosts, funnily enough, although I like to call them clans. So how does a house sparrow live its life? Well, in the yearly cycle, it actually starts nest building sometimes in February, but usually March. And then we'll start laying eggs, and we'll finish the whole process in July. They can have up to 3 clutches a year. Certainly my ones only have 2. But they're quite successful, which is quite nice. So they can lay anything up to 5 eggs. Generally, I find that mine were laying about 3. They take 13 days to incubate, so they take turns, male and female take turns on sitting on the eggs. So when they hatch, then it's all hands to deck as usual, with male and female feeding the young, which will leave the nest after 15 days. So not too long in the nest. And then probably most of you have seen adults feeding the young outside the nest. You always recognize the young because they've got those little yellow patches either side of the bill, and they're quite noisy and quite demanding as well. So sparrows can have anything up to 3 clutches a year, but generally, I say my group this year actually had 2. In August, they all disappear, which is quite strange where they all go. Because they go off to find grasslands because in August all the grass seeds are ripened, and they go off in flocks to feed on that abundance. But they're back in late August, and then they spend the whole year hanging around. They certainly don't disappear. The one time of the year is when they do move away, but the rest of the year they'll hang around the nest boxes. They can be quite noisy, and they're certainly quite feisty. They're always fighting each other. Each sort of colony is actually run by a queen female, and she can be quite tough, even to the point of actually pulling out young of other females that haven't, who are actually breeding. So it's quite a tough life. I mean, this is why they used to be called Cockney sparrows. They're quite delightful, and they're good fun to have around. Sparrows also, apart from needing somewhere to breed and to roost, feather care is obviously quite difficult. So they're very clean. They like to bathe, often as a group. They like to have dust baths, and they also need to eat a lot of grit. So when you see them in the road, they're actually picking up bits of grit, because they're birds, and they're a bit like dinosaurs, that they have a gizzard. Dinosaurs had gizzards. They didn't have anything to chew, so you have a gizzard where you grind up food and you have stones in there. And birds, like sparrows, have exactly the same. So yeah, so they have quite a complicated life. They live about 3 years, so it's quite a fast turnover, but they are probably one of the most delightful birds to have around, I think. Good fun. So what do we use? Well, the nest boxes, because as we saw that they actually came from weaver birds in Africa. What suits them best is what's called a sparrow terrace. So there's three individual boxes joined together. Each one is its own little box, but you can actually open it up to access it for cleaning, which you would need to do in about September, October. If you've not got anything climbing up the front of your house or any creeper for them to perch, it's quite a good idea to fix something to the wall beneath the nest box, like perhaps this wine rack where they can perch, because when they're feeding young, they often sit outside waiting for the last one to come out before they go in. So they need somewhere to perch. And something like that would be quite useful. You have to be aware that they do droppings, and so make sure that it's not over your front door. And so the droppings will drop into the front garden. It's quite a rich source of fertilizer, so actually they're quite worth having. So other than that, it's they look after themselves really. Sparrows do attract predators, so quite regularly I get a sparrowhawk coming in and trying to catch one. Occasionally it does. I also get jays and magpies trying to get the young. And I have on occasions had a squirrel trying to gnaw its way into the nest box, unsuccessfully, thank goodness. And once I had a fox climbing up the rows trying to get them as well. So yeah, so they're always in danger of predators and things. So again, you have to be to think about that. It's interesting that actually classically all the nest boxes were supposed to face north, because the thinking is that they birds didn't like to come out with the sun in their eyes. You know, it's the Red Baron thing of actually the enemy coming out the sun. But I think, I mean, my two boxes face south and they use them quite happily. I think it's probably because they're desperate. And so they're going to use them anyway and take the chance. But it's worth thinking about. Certainly things like blue tits and great tits definitely do need to have the hole facing north, because they're only single parents. They're not there's not a group looking after, you know, working as a group. They have to come and feed the young every 20 minutes or so, and so they need a lot of flight in and out, and so it makes it more vulnerable to things like sparrowhawks. This is my house at 42 in Orchard Road, and you see I've got my two nest boxes up underneath the eaves. I've also got one tucked in by one of the windows. They're all fully used. I've left the rows to grow up because a lot of them, when they're roosting at night, prefer to go into the rose bed rather than actually into boxes, or there's not enough room. I don't quite know the dynamics of that, but I get a lot of them actually roosting in it. And also it's protection against things like sparrowhawks and birds, you know, like jays and magpies. So they come in and they come in probably around dusk, and they as soon as the light's up, they leave to go. But they always go in groups with little tweeters. This is Patty's further down the road. Her approach is different. She's got this lovely ivy up the front of her house, which she has pruned. It's just about ready for a prune now. Keep it nice and tight. And she's got a lot of them nesting in there. So no nest boxes, they're just doing, they would naturally and actually nesting in the ivy. If there's any concerns about the ivy damaging the brickworks, Patty has it on good authority from a builder that in the old days, the mortar would have been attacked by or damaged by the ivy, but modern mortar doesn't get affected, so it's no problem. But yeah, so Paddy actually has it pruned twice a year to a nice tight mass, and it's absolutely stuffed full of sparrows nesting and tweeting, which she loves dearly, I must say. The next one we're talking about really is swifts. I think people are thinking about having swift boxes. It's part of a group of, I suppose, similar looking birds, swallows, house martins and sand martins. Actually, swifts are not in the same family. They're actually more closely related to hummingbirds, surprisingly. Swallows and house martins, as you probably all know, build little cups to put in under the eaves. I've never seen that locally. I don't think the buildings are tall enough, and I don't think there's any history of them breeding here. Sand martins, if you want to see sand martins breed, go to the wetland centre over at Barnes. They've got a sand martin wall with about 60 pipes in a made wall, and they breed over there. Swifts are interesting and probably one of my favourite birds. So how do they run the year? Well, it's a very short period that they're up here. They don't really turn up until May, and they're really gone by the beginning of August. It's terribly brief, but they're lovely to see. So they lay probably 2 to 3 eggs, which take about 18, 19 days to incubate. And then the chicks will stay in the nest for a very long time, between 35 and 42 days. I mean, that's extremely long time. And then they leave the nest, and then they join the family group to learn to fly, I think, and also to be guided south on their amazing journey down to Africa. It's a rather remarkable fact that actually after they leave the nest, they won't actually touch ground again until they actually breed themselves, which is about 3 years. They don't perch, so everything is done on the wing. I think that's extraordinary. Feed, they sleep by turning off one side of their brain to sleep, and then they turn off the other side. Remarkable. They mate, they do everything in the air, so they won't. The only time they actually touch ground is when they're breeding. Quite wonderful, and I think watching swifts go through the air is just one of the joys of life, really. They again they need a specialized box because of the way that they actually do the breeding. So this one is the classic one, RSPB box. So the hole at one end, so they fly in, and then the nestlings are up at the other end, safely out of the way. I mean, it has been noticed that actually sparrows, if there's not enough nesting places for sparrows will move in as well. So it can be quite, if there's not enough, nesting places for sparrows, they will take it over. So it can be a bit difficult, really. There was talk about actually having them on the back of houses in Orchard Road, but actually I would say that that's not high enough really for them, that they like to be well off the ground, and also they actually like to go really where they've been before. And we've got no history in this road of swifts as far as I know, and I've been here for 35 years. I think a good site for a box would be the lift tower on the station. You can see I've marked would be a perfect place to put a swift box with every chance. I mean, it's the right height off the ground, and it's facing the right way, so it's facing north, so the chicks don't get too hot. So that's definitely worth thinking about. I think over in Isleworth, they're building the tower, the lift tower over there, and they're thinking about putting swift bricks in, this thing where you've got a brick with a nest box behind it, a brick with a hole in it. But here you could certainly screw one of those swift boxes to the front there, and I think that might attract them, although it's not certain. There's too few swifts around these days. Again, we've lost half the population over the last 20 years, so they're not, they're going back to sites that they know. It's not often that they're faring for new sites, but we live in hope. There are other birds that actually we could help with boxes. Robins actually will use a box. Definitely blue tits and great tits. Again, on the back of the house, facing with the hole facing north, would be really good. And also, mustn't forget starlings. Again, we've lost so many of the population that actually somewhere for them to breed. When I first came here, there was a hole in the roof opposite, at the end of the roof, and actually they were breeding, but the landlords now filled that in, so there's no breeding going on. So they need support as well. And I say we've lost an awful lot of them.